this, I'm not for sale.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the 1% in Health. We have Jeff Beck on.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And we have Clarissa. Nash is missing tonight. Before we jump into the podcast, just again, trigger warnings with our discussions. Also seek professional help concerning conditions and in our conversations about diagnosis and health conditions. So welcome, Jeff. Thank you for coming in. It's getting late tonight, and you're taking time from your family and your busy schedule. So thank you so much.
Happy to do it.
Awesome. So Jeff, we discussed this a little bit before the podcast. I did not want to mess up all the beautiful things you do in life. And I'll ask you to introduce yourself and kind of all the things you have your hands into.
Honestly, this kind of conversation gives me anxiety because whenever someone asks me what I do in life, it's a hard thing for me to define because I do a lot of different things, and I've done a lot of different things. So to keep it short, the things that I am doing right now is I primarily I'm a board game designer, a photographer, a marketing consultant, a podcast host, a videographer, a drone pilot, a stand-up comedian, and a motivational speaker.
Are you missing anything?
Those are the ones I think I'm currently working on. I also have been a radiology technologist. I've been an advertising executive, the brand manager, entrepreneur. I was briefly a chauffeur. That was great.
Awesome.
Yes, carpet installer. We could talk for an hour about all the things that I've done to be. And I once sold a video of one of my cats to a TV show in Japan for $1,000.
Wow.
No way.
And if anybody can guess,
I'm also one of the top 1,500 Redditors in the world. So that's another random fact. So, and that's
today's episode is on ADHD, and it's beautiful. I'm excited for this one.
Do one of you guys have ADHD? I don't know anything about ADHD.
No. So I'm excited to dive into a few of these things you do, what you've done for the community. I get into some of your upbringing and talking about ADHD and your upbringing. We talked a little bit about it before the show, but before we get into all that, thank you for your introduction. I get anxiety too when people ask me what I do, and people leave more confused when they get out of the conversation, and you worry that you said too much, and you worried that you gave them anxiety or something by going through it all. Are these all common feelings?
Yes, they are. I am really great at analyzing things that I've said and then feeling silly about what came out of my mouth later. So, which is why I never listen to episodes of my own podcast. Oh, I'm also a podcast host.
Oh, you don't?
Podcast host. No, I don't.
But you don't listen?
I can't listen to myself. No, I'll listen probably to this episode because it's not my podcast. But it's weird to listen to my own episodes. So I listen and I go, man, there was a really good joke opportunity I totally missed there. And I feel guilt. It's great.
I was going to say that I'm intimidated by comedians because your wit and your sense of humor, like it's quick. And my brain, I'm medicated bipolar, and I'm a little slow these days. So I'm a comedian
of comedians, because we all have anxiety and depression and are way harsher critics of ourselves than anyone else. So you're in good company. Don't you worry.
Awesome. All right, let's dive in. We started before the show. We talked a little bit about growing up. Did you grow up in Utah? Tell us a little bit about your upbringing.
I grew up in South Seattle. My dad is an airline pilot, or was an airline pilot until he retired a couple of years ago. And we grew up about 10 minutes away from SeaTac Airport, and kind of the poorer part of unincorporated King County in Seattle. I went to public grade schools in the part of the city that had most of the government projects. So it was an incredibly diverse community, a lot of really humble households in that area. And there were some disadvantages of those conditions to go to school, but there are also some really great things. And I was exposed to just so many different people of different cultures and religions and backgrounds. And I think in my high school, there were something like 65 languages spoken by students that attended. Wow. And we also had, I think, the highest dropout rate in the state. So there were some real challenges. with that, but also some really amazing opportunities to grow up in an area that truly was a melting pot of cultures and ideas.
Awesome. And we talked a little bit about how you excelled in grade school. Let's dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, I was smart as a kid. I don't know what happened as I got older, but when I was a little kid, my parents actually moved me and my older siblings from the school that we were at to a different one because I had tested really high in some different proficiency tests. And so I was moved in to a new school, and in second grade, I was attending fifth grade classes, and
wow,
they had me in, I was a little tiny kid with a bunch of older kids. It's actually a fun memory that I just had of a fifth grader who was in that class with me, and he was about twice my size and bigger than everyone else in the class, and he kind of took me under his wing, and I helped him with his homework, and he made sure I didn't get made fun of as the little kid in the class. So
love that.
Kenny Baker. I haven't thought about him for a long time. I hope he's doing well.
So you were in second grade in fifth.
In
basically.
fifth, yes,
fifth graders.
I think so.
Wow.
Yeah, I was a fifth grader.
I was so tall that when I was in kindergarten, the principal took me to the fifth grade classes and asked if I was their student. People thought I was in the wrong hall.
Oh, that was never a problem I had ever. So
different sort of issue. Yes.
Yeah. I was short even for a second grader.
Apologize for Clarissa. She always gets the short end of the stick if we have technical difficulties, and she's on our phone with a little bit of echo while we're spoiled with headphones and mics, but she's always a trooper and makes things happen quickly. So thanks, Clarissa.
Yeah. So that the
Jeff,
program
go ahead.
that I was in, they placed you based on where you scored, not based on what your grade level was. It was, and I can't remember what the name of the program was, but so I was one of, I think I was the only one in the second grade, but the class was second graders, third graders, fourth graders up to the fifth grade. So not all of them were fifth grade. So it was a mixture of ages, and you're placed based on kind of your capabilities and where you're at within your learning curve. So
did you know at the time you had something special going on in your brain? That you were smart?
Not really, because it's hard to look at yourself from outside of the box. There were little moments that my parents would say things, and I'd clue into the fact that I'd done something that they thought was different or but I honestly, when they'd say things like that, I would feel a lot of fear. Probably the scariest word in my childhood and even in my young adult years is the word potential, because you get that talk of like, hey, Jeff, you're not living up to your potential. You're smarter than this. You could be doing better. You could be more successful than you are in this class, or if you just would work harder, if you could just, focus and do things, you have the potential to be doing so much more. And so I really grew to be scared of that word potential, because it meant that I wasn't succeeding, and I felt like I never could succeed, because I guess the thing I did notice is that it was a lot harder for me to focus and to pay attention unless it was something that I was really interested in, and then it was really hard to get me to not focus on it.
No one ever said anything about ADHD or anything though in your entire childhood, or
I think parents almost purposely avoided seeking a diagnosis for me. I had a couple of cousins that had been diagnosed with other disorders and had been heavily medicated, and I think that they were really worried about medicating me, because it was still kind of in the early years of figuring out how to help kids with ADHD. So I think that I'm not sure if they purposely avoided the diagnosis, but they saw me doing well in school, and they figured if he's above his grade level and he's scoring like the 99th percentile on every test they throw in front of him, he must be just fine. We don't need to do anything because he's doing just fine. And I was, through grade school and through middle school, I was on math teams and always did really well. And then I got into high school, and things started to really change for me at that point in time.
Were there priorities that changed? What changed? Was it you were interested in other things, or what?
Well, I'd been brought into the program at Southern Heights, which is the grade school I was at, and I think that the teachers knew that I was one of the kids that was pretty bright at the school there, and so I think that they kind of accepted the fact that I was talkative and busy, knowing that I was going to be just fine in the class and that I was a high performer. But when I got into high school, my first math teacher that I had there didn't know anything about me, because why would they? I was just a student in their class that couldn't keep his mouth shut. And she was later in her career and had little patience left for the students, and was teaching at a difficult high school with a lot of disruptions. And I ended up in the hallway for at least half of class, if not the whole class, every single day for my freshman year in high school. For talking and for blurting out witty, stupid puns, things like that in class. Yeah. So I think I might have just disconnected my mic. Oh, there we go. You guys hear me? Okay. Anyways, I went from loving math, like I'd voluntarily been on math teams and gone and done state competitions doing
Amazing.
math, to being totally lost and behind my freshman year in high school, and I started to hate it because I just felt like I couldn't understand anymore. And also I'd done everything in my head when I was in grade school, middle school, and all of a sudden when I had to start showing my work, I realized that because I'd been figuring things out just on my own for so long, I'd missed some of the fundamental steps in actually knowing how to do the work and solve more complex problems. So yeah,
Did grades suffer? Was it emotional?
Yeah, it wasn't like I went
suffering?
from an A student to a F student, but I my grades started to go down. I started getting B minuses and A's instead of all A's like I had previously, and it actually led to a pretty big shift in my trajectory of schooling. I had a conversation one night with a cousin of mine who's a really good friend of mine, who is a couple years ahead of me in school, and he was asking me how I was doing in school, and I said, I'm doing all right. I'm getting like a 3.2 GPA, and he goes, that's not good enough, Jeff. You're too smart to be getting that, and if you don't have like a 4.0, you're not going to have a choice of what school you go to. And I was depressed about it because I was a sophomore in high school. I'm like, it's too late for me to fix that. But after that conversation, there was a conversation that I had with a counselor at school, and they said there's a new program that we're trialing here called Running Start, and it allows students their junior and senior year, instead of attending high school, to go to community college. And
Nice.
and you can study at community college concurrently with one or two high school classes, and you'll graduate with an associate's degree in addition to your high school diploma, and then you'll be a transfer student instead of a incoming freshman at any university. And I saw that as kind of like an opportunity to start over fresh. So I went and participated in that program and ended up graduating with an associate's degree a couple weeks before I graduated from high school, which is kind of
Beautiful. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I've known one other to do that, and I love that they have that. It's like and being a transfer student helps you get into the college you kind of want to as well too, right? Is that true or not?
Sweet.
Yeah.
So having an associate's degree did make it easier for me to get into college. But right out of high school, I went and served an LDS mission in Honduras. So I put that on hold for a little bit, and then applied to go to BYU when I returned from Honduras. And it was kind of a double-edged sword. It did make it easier for me to get in. I didn't have to have even an SAT. I never took the SAT because it wasn't required.
Did you take
as a transfer student.
Did you take the ACT though?
No, I didn't take either one of those tests because they weren't going to look at them because I was a junior, as a transfer student. So yeah. So I might have taken the SAT on second thought, but I never submitted a score for it because it wasn't required. However, when I entered, I can't really remember. I think I really killed it on the language portion and struggled with a part of the math part. Like I got
interesting
to the point where basically because the funny thing about doing Running Start is that I think they were still kind of figuring out the program. So I ended up I took one algebra class my first year as a junior, and I never took trig. I never took calculus. Like I just missed huge portions of my math education.
Wow.
Because they'd assumed that I'd taken them in high school or something like that. And so it just didn't happen. But I did get to take an acting class. That was fun. So I'm sure that probably was a good substitute for trigonometry. Yeah, I got into BYU, but immediately was a junior. And then on top of that, they have a program there that if you speak a foreign language, you could take a test and then get a bunch of credits to say basically I've tested out of this many years of Spanish. So I think I got like 60 credits of college 60? Spanish in addition to I had a 2-year degree. So I was like a junior halfway through my junior year when I stepped onto campus. And the bad part about that is a lot of programs you have to declare your major your sophomore year. And so I was ineligible right off the bat for a bunch of programs that I was interested in. But I didn't think that really mattered because my plan at the time was to become an airline pilot. And as an airline pilot, you just need to have a 4-year degree. It doesn't matter what you do, as long as you finish college and then you go to your flight training. And my dad has a degree in psychology, which he never used because it was the degree that he had the fewest amount of credits left to finish when he was at UW. So that was my plan. But my older brother had graduated a couple years prior to me. And he'd gone into flight school. And this was back during the financial crisis. And he got furloughed from his first couple of flight jobs, and it scared me out of the industry because he was really struggling. He was working as a ramp agent, actually, like loading luggage, just trying to stay kind of current with his staying close to the airport and looking for opportunities. And it took him a long time to finally get into the airline industry. It was just a few years ago that he finally got to the status of commercial pilot. So anyways, I decided after looking at the flight career that business would be a good field for me to go into. So I took on in one semester a whole bunch of courses that I need to get into the business program, like accounting and statistics and a finance class and a math class. And they all were math heavy. And I hadn't taken a math class for 4 years. I didn't take any sort of primer. And that same semester, I met my wife when we started dating. And it was my first, I think my first semester back from my mission as well, that I stacked all these classes up, and I got C's in like 3 of them. I think the only C's I ever got in my entire time in school were all that semester, and they're all the ones I needed to get into the business program. So I was like, well, I guess business is not for me.
Let's put a little context to this. So this is BYU. This is not an easy college, university.
That's true. Yeah. And I was not ready to I should have taken a couple of primer courses and kind of warmed up to it, but I was like, I'll be fine. I'll do. I was not fine.
Call all those prereqs when you take them all the same semester business school suicide. I did the same thing.
Yeah, it was brutal. And older, more experienced me, I would have probably said, you know what, you're already 2 years ahead. Take them all over again. Just do it again the next semester, and you'll be fine. But I was like, oh, I'm a failure. I'm not meant for this. This is definitely an indication that I'm not good enough. And so I started looking for other options, and I thought, you know what, I should do advertising. People have been telling me my whole life that I'm good at selling things. Advertising is just creating things that sell other products. So I applied to the advertising program with the intention of writing and creating and directing advertisements. However, I found out after applying that I had too many credits to get into the creative track at the advertising program. So I had to go into the management track, which is more focused on the business aspect of advertising, which I wasn't as passionate about. And so by the time I graduated from school, I felt like I had kind of this nebulous degree. And I remember going home and visiting my parents with my wife and sitting in the kitchen, and the news was on as we were getting ready for breakfast. And there was a little program. It was like the 5 best and worst programs you could be in right now in the middle of the financial crisis. And they're counting up the list of the worst ones you could do. They're like, pottery glazing is number 5 on our list. And moving up to number 4 is Russian agriculture. And they're climbing up, and I'm like, oh man, please. And they, number 1 on our list of most useless degrees is communications and advertising. It's like, oh, that's my degree. That's great. Yeah. Just graduated college. I've got a baby and a wife. And what did I do? What on earth did I do? And so I fortunately had gotten an internship out of school to go be an assistant advertising salesperson at Como and Star and KVI in Seattle. Fisher Communications was the company, and the manager there, Bryce Philippi, actually was another BYU grad, which is how I'd gotten the connection to go and intern there. And then they hired me as an advertising salesperson. So I went and bought like 5 suits, including 2 brown ones, because I was really stupid that age in my life and thought the brown ones looked, why would you buy a brown suit? Anyways, I went and started working in advertising, and there was this crop of young ad execs that were all a couple years older than me that were all doing well together. And they'd been given kind of the best radio program to sell on, which is Como News Radio, because the news station had huge amount of listeners and really long listening sessions as well. And so the commercial breaks were really effective. And they said, all right, Jeff, well, we're going to have you sell KVI, which had been a talk radio station and had great listenership. But they decided right after I got there that they wanted to try something new with it and turned it into an oldies station on AM radio.
Oh, wow.
And as a result of that, they lost 95% of their listenership.
Whoa.
And I was also given the opportunity to sell the evening programming of the nationally syndicated talk shows for Star 101.5 station, which is kind of the women 25-54 station, which had great listeners, but no one wanted the evening programming because the listeners dropped off and they were sporadic. And I didn't really know what I was doing. The rest of the kids in that class I say class, but that group above me, they'd had regular trainings, and I was just kind of thrown in and said, just go out and talk to people and see if you can get them to buy radio advertising. I had I had zero confidence in the product after the first couple of sales that I made, and people saying, well, I paid you a couple grand and never got a phone call. And so I started to feel guilty that I'd even be trying to sell this product that I didn't believe in. So at a year, I had been on a stipend. They were giving me a small salary in preparation for me eventually transferring over to commissions. And I did not have many commissions at that year point. And they offered to extend my grace period another 6 months. I said, no, this is, the writing's on the wall. This is not what I should be doing.
It sounds like they set you up for failure.
The funny thing is, looking back, I can see it that way. At the time, it didn't feel that way. It just felt like I was failing. And I was very similar to when I did poorly in my classes. I didn't look at that as, hey, that was kind of a poor decision to take all those hard classes at the same time. As I just am not good enough. I'm inept, and I just don't know how to work hard enough. I don't know how to do as well as other people. And so I had a lot of feelings of inadequacy,
which is amazing because you're performing at a high level. You're getting good grades at a high end university, doing amazing things. You're married young, you're accomplishing so much, and you still feel this self-deprecating feeling that you're describing now, which is
that was my inner dialogue all the time. And I really lived with this sense of fear of, I didn't want people to know who I really was. Like, oh man, they'll know, they're going to figure out that I really am just like super distracted and that I'm lazy and I'm a procrastinator. And that's how I viewed myself. And so if someone gave me criticism at work, or if I wasn't performing well, I had no problem just taking it to heart that it's my fault because I'm a loser. I'm not any good at these things, and I'm not normal. I'm not ever going to be good like these other people are.
Do you think
so I left that job?
Drive you? Did they drive you though that whole time to perform at the high level?
They did to an extent. They also, I think, kept me from being able to fully succeed as well, because I wasn't embracing the parts of my personality and my skills that were worthwhile. All I could see were shortcomings and weaknesses. And I was so worried about hiding those that I wasn't really leaning into my strengths at that stage of my career.
Thanks for sharing that.
So skipping ahead, I worked then. I went and got a job kind of on the other side of the equation as an assistant media buyer with a startup in Seattle. And I was there for 6 months. It was the worst job I've ever had in my life. My role there was to take PDFs of like purchase agreements that had been photocopied multiple times, showing like what ads had been purchased, and then transfer those into an Excel spreadsheet. So I was doing manual data entry with like fuzzy PDFs. And I remember sitting at my computer and like within like 10 or 15 minutes of starting, my hands would literally be shaking and my body, like I just felt my skin crawling. Of like, I can't stand doing this. So I did what I typically do in a job. Is I said, there's got to be an easier way to do this. And so I started cruising the internet looking for a program that could interpret the data on that spreadsheet, grab it and spit it out so I didn't have to manually type it. And so I found a program that was able to grab the data, and then I perfected getting it to read the data correctly and put it into another spreadsheet. This is back in early like 2008, 2009. So there weren't many programs that did that at that period of time, but it had text recognition, and then I could get it to enter in the spreadsheet. So it took it from like a 40-hour-a-week job to like a 4-hour-a-week job, which is great for me.
Oh, you put yourself out of work.
And then they fired me.
I was waiting for the comedian to come out on that one.
Yeah, I was like, what do you mean I can't just play foosball all day long? I did my work. So that was one of the darkest days of my young adult life. The day prior,
because you did a great thing.
Well, I'd done a great thing. But I didn't view it as a great thing at the time. I viewed it as, that's just me being lazy again. That's just, look at that. I just found the shortcut. I'm always just finding shortcuts, and I can't let them know that I did this thing and how I'm doing it, because then they're going to expect me to do something more. And I can't have them expecting more of me, because I'm not capable of doing more. I'm scared. I don't want them to know that I have potential to do something more than I'm doing right now. We put an offer in for our first house the day prior to me going into the office and getting sat down by my boss and saying, you've been let go, Jeff. You need to go pack your stuff. It's time for you to leave. And I remember walking out to the bus stop on a cold, drizzly Seattle day and sitting and waiting for that bus and just sitting there in tears, wondering how am I going to go home and tell my wife, who was so excited for our first home, that we had to cancel the offer and that we were not going to be able to buy a house, and that I was out of work and I had no prospects for another job. I felt really fortunate to have this one. And I found out later that day that the company had lost their largest client a couple of days prior. And this was a startup, and that they let go of a third of the staff. And I was the first one that they talked to. That helped a little bit, that it wasn't personal, that they weren't just firing me because they thought I was a lousy employee. And then they sold the company about 6 months after that. So I would have been out of a job at that point in time anyways. But this was still the peak of the financial crisis and the recession. Felt like I'd failed twice. And so my wife and I, we went out to visit my grandparents for a couple of days, and my parents volunteered to take care of our oldest son, who was the only child we had at that time. And we went out and just did some soul searching, some praying, and trying to figure out what I was going to do next, because we were scared of what we were going to do. By the end of that weekend, I'd made a decision that I needed to go back to school again. And I, to skip forward, kind of did what I call a parachute career, like an emergency exit of advertising, because I needed to find a job to support my family. And I found out that I could do a 2-year program and become a radiology technologist and make $60,000 to $70,000 a year working in healthcare. My wife was a nurse, and she'd been the one who really was making better money during the first couple of years of our marriage. And she'd worked during the last year that I was in school. And I said, I want that sort of stability in my life right now. So I went back to school, got a degree, and then worked for the next 3 years as a radiology technologist. However, during that time, I had to pay my way through school a second time. I'm going to tell you guys a really random story about another way that I earn money.
This is beautiful.
Wild.
Every for people that have ADHD, and the journey that you're taking us through emotionally, and the steps, having a kid, having a wife, buying a house, you're in your early 20s or mid 20s. This is it's there's so many of us that can relate with this. So thank you for sharing every step and how you felt about every step.
Yeah. So I had to go back and work in order to pay my way through school. And so I'd gotten a job working at T-Mobile, because I'd done that when I went through BYU. I could go sell phones and make $30 to $35 an hour, have a really flexible schedule because it was at a kiosk at a mall that was open long hours. So I could go to school in the morning, go work in the evening, and make decent money, and I think I even had some healthcare benefits from that job. So anyways, I was working, and my strategy as a salesperson has always been to be really sociable and to know more than anyone else, and to be able to answer any question that comes my way, because I know more about the products than other salespeople do, and know more about the plans and what's offered by competitors. So I spent a lot of time when customers weren't in the store reading different tech news blogs that would have rumors and reviews of new devices. And one of my favorites was a website called androidpolice.com. And there was an article that was written on there that hardly got any traction about a really random thing. And as soon as I read it, I saw opportunity. And I go, this is something I'm going to do here. And what it was is there was a contest that had been announced for a movie called Turbo Racing League. It was a movie released by DreamWorks, I believe, about snails that raced each other, racing snails. And in conjunction with the launch of the movie, there was a big campaign where they'd released a mobile game on Android and on the iPhone. And every week, the top 10 racers in the world were winning cash prizes. And the first week was only going to run from Thursday through Sunday. And then it was going to be another 7 weeks after that were a full week. And I go, this is a 3-day weekend. No one's heard about this thing. I'm going to win this. I'm going to win money. I'm going to just play this, and I'm going to win. And so I downloaded the app, started racing my snail around the course. And within a couple of hours, I was in the top 10 on the leaderboards. So I went home from school and I played till like 2 a.m. I had 2 phones because I had one from work and my personal one. So I charged one of them. And this was back in the days where like 3 hours of screen time like killed your battery. That was all a phone could take. So I'd be charging one and then playing the other. And I literally got blisters on both my thumbs. Oh my god! As I was playing like through the whole weekend. And my wife's like, "What are you doing playing a kid's game on your phone?" I go, no, it's okay. I'm going to pay for college with this. She's like, "Who did I marry?" And I'm like, no, it's I'm in the top 3 right now. Right now, if I take 3rd place, that's $10,000. So I just don't worry about it. It's fine. And she's just like, so, but man, I was killing it. And then the last few hours before the end of the contest, I dropped down to like 5th, 6th place. And then I got a score that got me back up to number 3 at like in the last closing minutes. And then it closed. I was in 3rd place, and the prizes were $25,000 for first, $15,000 for second, and then $10,000 for third place. So
Wow.
I'd won 10 grand. And I went over and showed my wife. I'm like, look, this third place. I just won $10,000. Yeah, that's not real. No, but it is. I read about it on the internet. You can believe things on the internet. So it took them like a week to reach out to me. And they finally contacted me and they said, are you Jeff Beck? We need to verify some information from you. We need to get your date of birth and verify that you are a citizen of the United States. And they said, you actually did not come in third place. It's like,
What?
Are you kidding me? And they go, yes, because the person who came in second actually was under the age of 18 and I guess made the mistake of telling them that they were disqualified. So I became the de facto second place winner and I won for racing a snail.
Unbelievable.
Which the amount for my tuition to go back to school happened to be just shy of $15,000. So I paid my way through college by racing a snail.
On a video game.
On a video game on my phone.
I love that story. I love that you found opportunity in something. It was like turning a rock and seeing a fleck of gold underneath of it. It's like,
it
I love that you saw the opportunity.
Yeah. So that opportunity led to another opportunity because that website that I mentioned, androidpolice.com. After that, sometime after that, a few months later, when I had to quit my job at T-Mobile because the second year of the program, I had to do clinicals 3 days a week and there wasn't time to work a job. I thought, what could I be doing that could help me make money that doesn't require me to go anywhere? I could write for that website for Android Police. So I sent an email off to the boss, to Artem. I said, hey, I've always liked your website and I sold phones for a while. And one time, like 3 years ago, I took a class in journalism. You should give me a job.
Wow.
And sent an email and promptly forgot about it. And then like a month later, he replies and goes, hey, Jeff, thank you for your email. We're looking to hire some new journalists. Why don't you have an interview? So I had zero experience doing that. I just had said, you should hire me. Definitely. You should let me do this. And so I was terrified. And long story short, they hired me and I worked for them. And for the first few months, I thought every day I was going to get fired because I had so many grammatical mistakes and issues with printing things or publishing things at the wrong times or forgetting links, all the ADHD mistakes of hurrying. Yeah. And I had an editor who was just really stern with me. Yeah. And that was a changing point in my life though, because after a while I realized that Rita, who was the name of the editor, she lives in Lebanon. I think she's actually in Canada now, but she would correct me. And at first my instinct was, this is hurting me. You're doing this to hurt me. And that's why you're correcting me. And that's how I'd always viewed correction, is that like, this is punitive. You wanted to hurt me. You're wanting to hurt my feelings by telling me that I'm doing this wrong. And I transitioned into understanding, you're doing this to help me. You're doing this because you care about me, because you don't want me to be fired. You want me to fix these mistakes because you like me and because you like the work that I do. You just want me to fix the mistakes that I'm making in the work. And that was, sounds like a really basic thing to understand, but that was kind of a deep thing for me to understand as an adult. And it started to change the way that I looked at myself of not having to be scared of mistakes, but instead focusing on making improvements. And that was a mindset shift for me. So anyways, awesome. I started writing for the website. I was making a couple grand a month, writing news articles, and most of the stuff I ended up writing were deal alerts, which are a short article of, hey, this thing is on sale at this price through this vendor through this time period. And I liked those because they were really straightforward and I could write them really fast. And I got paid the same amount for writing that as writing a news article. And of course I was looking for the shortcut. What's the quickest thing I could write to make the most amount of money in the short period of time that I have to work? So I continued doing that job as I worked my way through and getting my way through the RadTech program, and then got a job as a radiology technologist in Kirkland, Washington. And as I started working full time in the hospital, I started to write less and less for Android Police. And I was about to finish writing there and quit when I had a conversation with my boss one day about not being able to get advertisers for the podcast. And the podcast was one of the last few things that I was a part of. And I was like, I like doing the podcast. I don't want to cancel it. It's fun. It's a good outlet for me to be obnoxious. And I don't have many of those in my life right now. I said, well, what if I were to sell advertising for you, Artem? And he goes, do you want to sell advertising for me? I go, well, I'll let you know. I have a degree in that. I'm a pretty mediocre writer, but I'm really good at selling things. It's kind of what I do. I'm good at selling stuff. You should maybe have me do that for you instead. And he said, well, I'll give you a chance. Why don't you try to sell advertising? So first decision I made in selling advertising after like 2 weeks was that I wasn't going to sell the podcast because we had way too few listeners and it was garbage and no one wanted to buy that. However, I realized that the website was was seriously underutilized for direct advertising sales. It was being monetized entirely from Google ads, but no direct advertising. And Artem, as he started to channel all these emails he was getting, I realized there was a lot of demand for advertorial content on the website from a lot of big tech companies. So over the course of the next few months, I started to ramp up the advertising program at Android Police, and I loved it because I was given total autonomy. There was zero expectation. There was no, I had no issues with worrying about my potential because there was none. There's like he'd been selling like $1,000 in advertising a year, in direct ads, or maybe actually it was like $10,000, and I did like $25,000 my first month. So he was super happy. And the only thing I was worried about was, well, can I keep doing this? Because I don't want to be a disappointment because I did it once. I need to do it again. I also, by that point in time, at that point in time, I started to understand how my brain worked better and the motivations that I needed. So I had a really frank conversation with them. I said, I will sell a lot better if you give me incentives, if you give me prizes, or if you give me bonuses that I can earn. And so he said, okay, well, for the first month, we're gonna set your goal of X amount. And I hit that. And the next month he said, well, let's double it. And I hit that amount. And we double again. And I hit that amount. And after 5 or 6 months, he said, we're just going to do it with the incentives of you getting a higher commission when you reach this higher amount. And I'm just going to pay that higher amount every single time because you're
good job.
So in the course of the time that I was at Android Police, I grew their advertising by, I think, about 1,000%, which had started pretty small, but we went from basically non-existent to one of the largest players in direct ad sales in the tech news industry at that point in time. And I was doing that while working full-time at the hospital.
Can I ask just one question here?
Sure.
Were you having to cold call so many cold calls? Did you know people? These were almost all, it was almost all warm leads of companies that were emailing us saying, hey, we want to advertise on your website. And then me figuring out how to gain their trust and what to sell them. Because we didn't really have a standardized platform of these are the ads that are available. So I created a bunch of new ad units of sponsored posts and then inserting ads into our content that got a lot of views, like our editorials and reviews of other devices. So I'd say, hey, you're a case manufacturer. How about we put your ad inside of the article that we write about the phone that you're making cases for, so people see that amazing content. Love that.
And then I also
you were creating.
Yeah. And I also looked at like our content calendar, said, hey, we have a huge amount of traffic over CES or Mobile World Congress. We've been charging the same amount for these ads this whole time. We need to be charging 2 or 3 times the rate during those time periods because we have more viewers. And actually by increasing the amount that people paid for them, there was more demand for them because all of a sudden it became a more desirable ad unit. So I grew it from having clients that were spending $1,500, $2,000 at a time to eventually having clients that were spending as much as $100,000 per year in advertising on the website. So as I'm working at the hospital, about 1.5 years in is when that really started taking off. Yeah. And within a few months, I was making more, working 15 to 20 hours a week for Android Police than I was making in the hospital. And because I was a rad tech, I had a lot of downtime because I went and worked once again in the area where I saw the most potential for growth, which was in the OR. So I quickly became the lead OR tech, and I was leading a team of surgical techs doing spine surgeries and hip replacements and vascular procedures. And I'd have a lot of downtime. So I'd just be sitting in a corner waiting for them to say x-ray and for me to go over and take a picture. So I was literally doubling up. I was able to work on my phone in between having to take x-rays and respond to emails. Hustling. I was hustling. Yeah. At the same time as this happening, my parents' business that I'd been a part of this entire time, which I haven't talked about at all, was also growing. And for those who are familiar with it, my dad is Grandpa Beck of Grandpa Beck's Games. So if you've ever played the game Cover Your Assets, Skull King, those are our best-selling titles. And during this time period, while I was going through school and starting as a rad tech and working for Android Police, I also designed my first game for their company called The Bears and the Bees and created the mechanics and then helped to direct the artwork and launch it. And then I did another game with my first Kickstarter called Cover Your Kingdom, and ran a Kickstarter campaign on my own and figured out how to make that work and raised about, I think, $90,000 from that. Long story short, my parents realized that they needed more help. Their business was growing, and I saw that my time working in the hospital was really kind of leeching my life. I was working 10-hour shifts. I was getting up like 4:30 in the morning, and I wasn't taking care of my health, and I was just really tired all the time. And so I realized that if I went and worked half time for my parents and half time for Android Police, I could actually make more money than I was making working for the hospital and working for Android Police. So I left my short career of 3 years as a radiology technologist to become an employee for my parents and continue working for Android Police.
And you're underestimating your ability to take risk too. Like, it's amazing. Like, most people
That's terrifying
are
in
scared
my
to
life.
yeah, I mean, you were a risk taker. You're an entrepreneur. You're right brain, left brain. You're trying to provide for your family and do the stable thing, but you obviously thrive in chaos. And for listeners, being able to take risk, it scares a lot of people, right? And you were just jumping. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was
Awesome.
it was definitely a leap of faith, and there was the thought as well that I could go back to this if I needed to.
Yeah.
But I never will. Frankly, I'd gotten bored of it after 3 years of being a rad tech. I felt like I'd learned it all, and it no longer was challenging. And I also realized that I'd taken that job because I had shortchanged my potential and taken stability over risk and reward. And I realized my success at Android Police really fueled my confidence that, hey, you can do something great. I really had my confidence shaken by those first couple of jobs that didn't go well out of college. And running the advertising program at Android Police really helped to rebuild my confidence, and also taught me some really important things along the way as well. The point where things really became successful at Android Police is when I had a coworker named Zach who came on board. And Zach basically became my other half of my brain. He was the person who took care of all of the organization, who ran all of the billing, who kept track of all of the accounting for the advertising program, because I was running so many clients by the time he got on that I was just drowning in it. And I was missing payments and not following up with emails. So I started I talked to my boss once Zach had helped me with a couple of things and said, look, he is worth paying more than anyone else in your staff, because if Zach is helping me, I can sell twice as much. So he became my number two there at the business. And he had a very, like, almost the polar opposite of my brain, where he's very security driven and really organized. But the selling aspect was terrifying to him. And that was the fun part to me, was the pitching and the closing. So that taught me something really important, that I didn't need to be worried about my deficiencies, because my strengths were really valuable, and that I could find someone else to work with me on my deficiencies. And as long as I treated them well, we would make a really good team, and that they wouldn't view that their role was lesser or undesirable, because they were doing what they were happy to be doing, while I was left to do what I was good at and what I was happy to be doing. And so there's always been a Zach for me in every job and organization that I've worked with since then. I'm very honest when I talk with someone, if they're considering hiring me or having me do a project with them, and I'll tell them about my shortcomings and my weaknesses and say, I need someone in this role or I won't be successful. But if you have someone in that role, I can be a really valuable member of your team. So anyways, I started working with my parents. I helped them to rebrand their company, brought in a graphic designer, and we overhauled the entire product line in preparation to take it into mass retail. And that was a really big project. I could talk about that for another 3 or 4 hours.
I love that the right brain and left, you say other half of your brain, but I think you've got both sides functioning at a high level. So you might need help, because you're pushing the envelope, and these are good problems to have, but you can do math, you can do science.
I love doing math. I love doing problem solving. Yeah. I struggle with monotony. If it's something that I have to do more than once, I'm not going to like doing it.
That's a good thing. You shouldn't. Yeah.
Which honestly, I still say it like if I feel weak saying that, because it, like, my wife does all of her finances. I can't stand to pay the bills. Like, I can't stand to do the things that require me to be regular and normal.
Let's jump into that. Let's jump into that. So talk about when did you come to realization of this? Like, it sounds like I love you got less self-deprecating. You were finding your skills. You were finding people to help you with your skills. You were telling people what it was that they had to have it in place to make you successful. When did you start figuring out some of the ADHD stuff?
It was right around this time, after I left the hospital. And I think it was the successes that I'd had that allowed me to basically take these blinders that I unconsciously put around me of, I don't want to know what's wrong with me. I know there's something wrong with me, but I don't want to know what it is because I'm scared of it. And suddenly I said, maybe there's something that's right with me. Maybe I should learn more about myself so I can understand what's good about me, instead of being so scared of what's wrong with me. And it
How
was at
old
that
were you?
point in
Do you
time.
mind me asking how
I was
old you were at this point?
33. This was 4 years ago.
Okay, sweet.
And my wife encouraged me to go in and talk to a doctor and to seek a diagnosis for ADHD, which had been a joke for a long time. I said, oh, it's just my ADHD brain, but I never really took it serious. I never really thought that was ADHD because I never manifested the signs of outward ADHD as a kid. I wasn't fidgety. I wasn't running around the classroom. It was all internalized. My brain was just always
inattentive,
spinning. Very inattentive. Yeah, I could sit through a lecture and realize I didn't catch a single word of it because I was thinking about something else. I'm laughing because I went in, spoke with the doctor, took an evaluation. They said you're most definitely ADHD, and that was hard. It was really hard. To confront it and to finally own it, and then it wasn't the diagnosis. It was all the reading and research I did around it of what a lifestyle with ADHD is like, and what a relationship with someone who has ADHD is like. And I started taking medication as well. And that gave me, it's like for the first time in my life, my head kind of came up out of the clouds of struggle and survival mode. And it gave me this new sense of clarity and self-awareness that I never had before. And honestly, the feeling that I felt was just shame. I felt so much shame because I looked back at my life and thought about all these friendships I'd had and the times I'd talked over people and the times that I'd failed in commitments that I'd made, that I hadn't followed through on things I'd promised to do. I thought about the career choices that I'd made and having struggled in college. And I wondered, where could I be? What could I have done if I'd known? I went through a period of mourning. Like I felt like I was mourning the death of my early 20s. Like I felt like I'd wasted my life. And then I started to turn around and I had this change of perspective of, instead of focusing on what I could have been in terms of like what I could have done better, I looked at things of, but how much worse could things have been for me? And somehow miraculously they aren't. Divorce rates are way higher for people who are ADHD that are untreated. Rates of accident are way higher. Rates of addiction are way higher. And here I was at 33 years old. I graduated. I had 3 degrees, granted 2 of them were associate's degrees.
Killing it, doing amazing. You're so hard on yourself.
And I'm married, and my marriage, I mean, bless my beautiful, wonderful wife, Lorette, for sticking with me through all that time, because man, I would have left me. I was her snail racing husband. But it was kind of a light switch went off of, all things considered, you're in a pretty great place. You own a home, you've graduated college, you're providing for your family. Yeah, it's not conventional, but you're not conventional, Jeff, and that's okay. Yeah. And something that I really loved is that around the same time, it was a period of like self-discovery and exploration. All of a sudden, the things that I hadn't wanted to do before in learning more about myself, I wanted to know who I was. I wanted to understand how my brain worked. I felt like I was given a manual for my brain, and I understood finally like how to turn things on and turn them off that I just never understood before. And I started taking a bunch of personality profiles. And I know that can be considered kind of quasi-science in certain circles, like the Myers-Briggs evaluations. Yeah. However, it helped me a lot because I was able to identify in my personality profile some things that were really true about me, and understanding like what my drivers were and triggers that I had and things that I did really well and things that I struggled at, and being able to be honest with that and honest with others about what was good and what was bad became very therapeutic. It was like I felt like I could be honest with myself. I didn't have to hide anymore. And so I found out that I was an ENFP when I took this personality evaluation. And at the bottom of the evaluation, after reading all the things about it, I said, these are some other people in history that are also ENFPs. Yeah. And the names on the list were like Walt Disney and Roald Dahl and Michael Scott from The Office and Willy Wonka and Dr. Seuss. And I realized looking at it, I go, these people all have something in common, and it is who I am. I'm realizing what I am right now. I'm eccentric. Love that. That is what I am. I am eccentric. And that word has a negative connotation to a lot of people, but I just realized my life is meant to be big and bold and chaotic because that's who I am. Yep. And I've been running from it. I've been trying to be the stable provider in a career job that lasts my whole life. And honestly, the thought of doing one thing for my entire life was hell to me. Like, it was terrifying to think about being chained to one thing and to only have one thing that I could do. And like my dad had been an airline pilot. That was his career. And I thought I had to have a career like that. My cousins that were really good examples, they were dentists. Like I thought that my identity was tied to what I did, and I hadn't done anything for long enough to feel like I had an identity. So I felt lost. And then I realized it's not about who or about what I do. It's about who I am. And that shifted my life, is understanding that I'm not trying to grow up to be a profession. I'm trying to grow up to be a person. And the person that I am a creator, and I find joy in making things and in finding things and discovering things.
Love that. Beautiful.
And finding and showing beauty to others that they might not have seen without my help.
Yeah.
And that has been the driving mission of my life since.
I wanted to ask, and I actually thought about this 10 minutes ago. I wanted to ask you, do you find comfort in doing all things? Or is there one thing that you want to do if you could do it? Maybe it's a super creative thing that's really hard to make money in, but if you could do that one thing, would you do that? Or are you okay doing the 10 things?
I love doing all the things. It's and I can't do everything, but I sure try. And it's funny, the more that I do, the more I realize that everything I do is connected. And that they aren't varied interests or different things, but they are all interlaced with each other. Like in doing board game design, I learned all about product development and pricing strategies, and that information is directly relevant to what I want to do now in writing and publishing children's books. And I also am doing stand-up comedy starting this month, and that is directly correlated because it allows me to establish a name for myself so I can promote the products that I'm making. And I also do photography on the side, and that is honestly the reason I do photography. The reason I do photography, I'm terrible at selling photos. People send me messages all the time to buy it, and I'm really bad at responding to it because it's meditation for me. That's why I go out and I take photos. I do it for myself, and then I share them, and that's why.
Which you got to go look up. Jeff's
what's your handle?
J Beck Photos, or you can look up Jeff Beck Photography on Facebook.
Amazing stuff.
If you look up just Jeff Beck, you'll find a guitarist from the 80s who my parents accidentally named me after.
Jeff, I did find that piece today. I had to put in Utah after Jeff Beck.
Yes. Oh, I've never Googled myself. We'll have to. I've just got used to it. Came up. You just see the sleeveless guitarist there. That's been a fun conversation I've had about 1,000 times. Like, oh, Jeff Beck. Yeah, this guy, right? And they do the air guitar, and I go, yeah, that's not me.
Exactly.
So where were we at? I can't remember what we're talking about.
I want, and sorry, I always talk over people too, so I apologize. But I'm so interested in so many of these things, and I want to get some context around too. And I think pointing out, I mean, you're still young. You've done so much. You've done some brilliant things. You thrive in chaos. You create. You're an inventor. You're a creator. So sorry for butting in at times, but I wanted to point some of the things out that you've done in such a short period of your time. I love the mindset, the realization. You're highly intellectual. You've got the energy. You're able to dive in with focus. When do you think it's a superpower now? When did you think it was a superpower?
I still am not convinced that ADHD is a superpower. Sometimes I still wish I could trade in the keys of ADHD at times, just for a day or two, to be neuronormal so I can get some stuff done. But when it comes to creativity and brainstorming and problem solving, it is a superpower. And the way that I can best explain what it feels like to have ADHD is I feel like a neurotypical mind, if you're looking at a problem, you're viewing it as a maze, and that you're starting here and you need to end up there, and there are all these paths that you have to get through there. And I feel like if we're talking about a maze that has tall walls in it, what I can do with the mind with ADHD is I can flood the maze and raise water above the walls. And so I can move from point A to point B without any obstacles. And I can see where I can go before anyone else can. And I can see a possibility of this connects to that. And I just need to slow down enough and be able to explain to you how it works. And probably the best example of that in my life is what I've done in the last year with Crumble Cookies and Grandpa Beck's games. Can I talk about that for a moment?
Of course. Yes.
This is the culmination of all of the things that God has developed in me in the course of my life. I really believe that the skills, I didn't realize I was being trained through all these random careers to do this project, which has really given me the opportunity to go off and now do whatever else I want to, because it's been successful. But I walked into a Crumble Cookie store for the first time about 1.5 years ago. A little context of where I was in my life at that point in time. I'm no longer with Android Place. They got purchased by another company, and they didn't understand who I was or the value that I brought to the table. And they wanted to cut my pay by half. So I left. And that happened 2 months after I'd left Grandpa Beck's Games as a full-time employee, because I realized that I had to either choose between having a relationship with my parents or a relationship with my parents as my bosses, and that I couldn't do both. And that work with my family is really hard. And that's a whole other conversation. But ultimately I decided that I loved my parents and I wanted a relationship with my family enough that I was going to sacrifice a very secure job that asked very little of me in order to take another step and go do things on my own, because I wanted to maintain the relationship I had with them and not risk it any further, because there were too many creative disagreements internally on the family business. However, prior to leaving the company, I had designed a game called Cover Your Cookies, which was a spinoff of our bestseller, Cover Your Assets. And I walked into a crumble cookie store about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and picked up one of their catering menus and looked at all these pictures of the cookies. And I had one of those moments where I crossed the maze.
I love these moments. I love these moments.
We need to make this game, and it needs to be with Crumble, and it needs to be sold in Crumble stores. Wow. And it took a couple of months for me to realize why that works so well. But the reasoning behind it was, we are a company that struggles with exposure. Our game spread almost entirely via word of mouth. The most important sale that we can make is to a person who's never been exposed to us before. And the best environment to make that sale is in a location where there are zero competitors, where we have a product that can sell with no other competing games. And we can be introduced to a brand new company. In order for a company to be willing to carry one of our products, though, we need to be advertising their product with our game. And what better way to do that than taking our flagship product, which a customer plays between 12 and 20 times a year, that's highly addictive and associated with great family memories, and tying it to the product line of another company, especially a company that has the same values that our company has of creating high quality products that are geared towards bringing families together. And if I can bring those two seemingly entirely different companies together, we can create something that has incredible synergy, that it promotes and exposes Grandpa Beck's Games while also increasing cookie sales every time that a person plays that game, because you can't play Cover Your Cookies without craving more crumble cookies. Is that true, Clarissa?
It is true. You gotta eat the crumble while you're playing.
Because the box is pink and all of the cookies in the game are the crumble cookies with their names. And so I designed the game as an incredibly effective advertisement for crumble cookies that a person wants to buy. So it's an advertisement that Crumble doesn't pay to have run on TV. They're making money when a person purchases that product and then brings it into their home and then evangelizes both Grandpa Beck's Games and Crumble Cookies every time they take that out of their house to go teach a family member or friend who may not have ever experienced either one of those product lines before. And they aren't doing that essentially, we run a multi-level marketing company that we don't pay our employees at, because they're running the exact same sort of environment where you host a party, you introduce the product, and then you get your friends to buy it. And they're getting, what do they get out of it? They get the satisfaction of having introduced their friends to something that's fun and something that's worthwhile, that isn't a screen, that they can do with their kids, and that everyone has fun, happy memories with. There are a bunch of other reasons as to why I felt it would work. But I just knew it. Like I said, I walked home, had another snail racing moment with my wife. Said, hey, just went to Crumble Cookies. I'm going to talk to my parents. I know I just left working with them, but I'm going to tell them I'm going to go to Crumble and I'm going to get them to make a game for us, and they're going to put their cookies in it. It's all going to work. Don't worry. I don't need another job right now. I'm just going to focus on this. We've got some savings. It's going to be fine. And she's like, we need to go adjust your dosage of Adderall.
Yeah. No, it's working this time. No. I know it's going to be good because it's working.
Totally. We're good. So long story short, I made the pitch to an amazing woman named Anna. She caught the vision. She carried it up the chain of Crumble. 6 months later, we had a contract. 6 months after that, the product was finished and designed, and it launched 2 months ago, and they've sold about 20,000 copies so far. And if they fully understand what it is and what it can do for them, we'll sell a whole ton more. They still haven't quite grasped entirely that it's not about the game sales, and that they need to be willing to sacrifice money on selling the game because it's about the cookie sales. But once that data is there, once they can take a look and see that every customer that has that game is now spending X% more on cookies than they did previously, they'll I hope reach the point where they say, hey, we're going to start giving this game 50% off if you buy a 6-pack of cookies, and promoting it more so that they can move more product. So that's,
and they have over 700 locations, right?
I think they're at 750. By the end of the year, they'll have between 1,300 and 1,500 locations. They're growing at it's fastest growing franchise in the world right now. So
I love these Snell moments. I love your mindset. I love your journey. You're still a young guy. You've had stability all along. You probably didn't think you had stability, but you had the ability to have stability the entire
Yes.
time. And you're
I've always
seeing
felt
these
that
Snell
that is
moments.
totally safe. My wife thought that we were crazy, but like whenever I needed the money, I can always make money. But I'm
Yeah.
not motivated by money. Like money
Yeah,
is
yeah,
like if I wanted to just be wealthy, I'd go sell insurance or something.
Yeah.
But I'm motivated by creating and
yeah,
by combining, like taking
Yeah.
two seemingly different things and being able to push them together and make them work. That's really exciting to me. Like that.
I love it.
That is my favorite thing. Yeah, that's what I'm working on right now.
Awesome.
And now that I have a little breather because the project is working and I'm receiving some money from the sales of the game, I'm able to branch out and do some other things. I just signed a contract with Altus Fine Art. They're going to be selling my artwork, and it's going into Deseret Book. And I'm doing a signing night there later this month. And then I'm also doing my first stand-up performance. I did improv comedy back when I was at BYU. I was in the it's called Laugh Out Loud was the group I was in at BYU. We performed improv at the same time that a group called Divine Comedy was doing sketch comedy, and those cast members ended up becoming Studio C. So I performed with the Studio C cast back when I was at BYU, where we do combined shows with each other.
Awesome.
And had a lot of fun doing that. So now I'm branching out and getting into stand-up because I don't think I could have done stand-up when I was 22 years old because I didn't have the self-awareness and I didn't have the story. I have learned to find humor in my life, and frankly, I have a very deep well of experiences that are really random to draw upon, which make for pretty funny stories. So
Yeah.
that's going to be my next adventure here is stand up and then writing children's books this year.
Awesome.
I love
Thank you so much for coming in and sharing all these nuggets. Do you have anything you want to leave with the audience about the career, entrepreneurship, risk, ADHD, anything that, what's your words of wisdom on anything? Is there anything else that you want to share?
When I was diagnosed with ADHD, it was amazing. After I found out, I had lived for so long with a sense of shame that there's something wrong with me. And once I realized, hey, I'm just different. It's not that I'm broken. I'm just different. I've been really open and talked to people and said, hey, I just found out I had ADHD and I want to talk to you a little bit about what that's meant for me. And have you ever wondered if you've had ADHD? And in those conversations, I found out that several people that I've been close to my whole life were diagnosed with ADHD and never told me they were on medication, never told me they'd been hiding it. And the thought that I had then was, man, if one of you guys had talked to me, I could have known years and years ago. So I don't hide it. I'm very open about having ADHD.
Thank you.
And I find it to be incredibly liberating and going in to talk to an employer and be like, hey, these are things that I suck at. And you need to know, like right now, because I don't want to fail you. I don't want you to be disappointed that I'm bad at remembering to put in my time card, or that I'm not going to be that you're gonna have to remind me 3 times to send you that project that's done, or that I'm not going to start on something until the day before it's due if it's only going to take me 4 hours to get it done. And those are things that you can know about me right now, because that's the way I am. But in addition to that, these are the things that I'm really good at, and don't fill my time with the stuff that I'm bad at, because I'm going to hate working here. I'm going to leave. Give me things that I love to do, and I'll be your best employee ever. You're gonna love having me here, and I'm gonna solve problems for you. And I'm gonna see the world differently for you. Just don't make me do freaking text entry.
I love it. You're brilliant. I love these Snell moments. I love that you see opportunity in the most creative ways. There's a lot of people that struggle creating right brain income, and you've done that. You continue to do it. You mix it with your you do have the other side, maybe organization you think you lack or something, but
I'm amazing at creating an organizational system. I'm just really bad at following it myself. But if you want me to like organize your closet, I will organize the crap out of your closet. Like, you will not believe how perfectly situated.
Just don't ask me to do it again.
Just don't make me do it again, and don't make me like do the upkeep.
I'll teach you how to do it.
I would love to learn how to. That'd be great. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. I hope that was what you wanted to hear, because that's what came out of my mouth.
It is. You're brilliant. I keep going. This is gonna be fun to share, and everybody that has, I don't know if I've never been properly diagnosed ADD or ADHD. I don't think they call it ADD anymore, but I have a lot in common with you. I was cutting you off, but I'm so intrigued with your story. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you, listeners. the lights out on Clarissa, which means we probably need to wrap it up. All
Hey,
right. Well,
but-
thank you, listeners.
You know,
and thank you.
I'll get in trouble with Greg and Neil if I don't put in a plug for my own
Plug
podcast
it.
that I do with them.
Plug it.
Yes.
I host a podcast with Neil and Greg called Left of the Lake, where we just talk about interesting stories and people and events that happen on the left side of Utah Lake in the cities of Saratoga Springs, Lehigh, Eagle Mountain, American Fork. So it's kind of a little bit of Utah history and a little bit of pop culture and a lot of interviews of just really fascinating, fun people. One of those was Clarissa, who we had on a couple months ago. And it was a really awesome conversation. So check us out if you want to hear more about the story of the area.
And laugh
Go
your
check it.
heads off. It's so good.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you find it entertaining, Clarissa. That's
I
great.
love it.
Go see his photography. Go see him at the Improvs. Go check out his podcast. You're doing amazing things. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. You have a good one.
Jeff.
Okay.